Well, there's nothing really special has been prepared in advance. There's nothing I have to say. It's fairly straightforward. There's no message, no messenger. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the format. And this format, just sitting like this and relating, has been going on for, well, as far as earliest records tell us, down to the line of the Pashupati period, which is the period where India as a civilization begins to trace its roots. The Pashupati period is at the time when the great civilization of Mohenjo-Daro that was discovered. So this is not in any way historical or scholarly exposition here, but just to say that people sat like this, even like this. There is a metop, a plate, a seal. It's known as Pashupati Seal. We talked about it just now, no? In Germany, in our 10-day program we were freshly from as ER, and Verli was with us early in June, and Sundari, of course, in both those immersions. So that Pashupati simply means Pashu and Pati, okay, beast and master. It's two terms, beast and master, Pashu, Pati. Pashu means beast, bound being, in other words, beast. Beauty and the Beast, beast. Take it or leave it. And Pati is a master. Pati is the one who mastered it. So that Pashupati seal begins to trace that very, very, very long along the long corridor of time. What you were conspecting, writing here, learning, all this is absolutely wouldn't have been here if not that. So therefore it feels fitting to trace these roots, the origins of all the Vedas, of all the perennial knowledge that we are indebted to India as a place on the planet. So, but in essence, what it meant and how it took place, it's like this. People sat and related. Before the academies were built, before the Sorbones of its time, right? It all came later. Before the Varanasis, before the... But that time of the ancient roots of what would become known to us as the great civilization of India, that Pashupati seal is a symbol of something. So maybe let this be an improvised, impromptu intro before we can give it to exchanges. So what is that? What was that? It was simply a metop, a kind of seal looking like plate, square in format, where a humanoid figure seated in cross-legged position, just like that, with a mask of a beast with some, antlets, horns. You can Google it, you can see that, and any crashed course in Indian culture would, history, you would encounter that. So what does it represent here? What's of interest to us here is that it represents this humanoid figure with a mask or some kind of ritualistic whatever on its head that clearly conveys the animal nature of things. Of course, lots of speculations and Indologists of all sorts, Brits and Germans, were rushed to interpret it back in the days when Indians did not have the right to access their own culture. Aside from that, a lot of time has passed since then, and it has been revealed that actually, potentially, these are the origins known today as yoga. These are indeed the origins of what known today as yoga, all forms of yoga. And what it represents here, that's why it's known as a Pashupati Seal, is having a human figure transcending its beastly nature. Not that it has that literal terms to that, because the advocates of giving it more of that rational explanation, linking it to some kind of rituals that maybe the hunters-gatherers were still doing in order to appease certain laws of nature before they go and kill the beast to consume it later, right? But that was rejected, refused, and the new line of thought was put forth that what it represents is the timeless tradition of the passage of knowledge of who we are. So this Pashupati stands here as a term that combined of the two. It's the master over the once beastly nature. Not beastly in the sense of how it is spoken in English language or any even Western European, Western culture alone. Not beastly in a sense like a beast. We all quite civilized in our, right, attires and our ways of how we are. But what it meant here, the core question of what the beast here represents, it simply represents someone who is like a herd, someone who is bound. His parameters are not free to go. She or he is bound. The herd. The herd. You know that term? Here. Everyone is here native in like that, right? Good. So, not free to go because it's that. So, and the party here stands for getting to the mastery of that what simultaneously presents itself as being a bound individual, bound being, bound creature. So this very interesting, very, in my view, in my understanding, in my sensibility, a very beautiful reminder that sets forth the entire leitmotif of that civilization. The entire leitmotif of Indian civilization could be traced to the sentiment expressed in that seal. Nothing else would be mattered. The palaces will be built. The empires will come and go. The land would be conquered and freed. Conquered and freed. The core question remained. Who am I? The core question remained. Yeah. What is going on? And that's what the Pashupati seal represents. What is the true state of affairs? So this is, to me, is of particular importance because that format is what it actually emblematically exemplifies. It's the human figure seated in a triangular position, which is the most conducive as we know it because of all this, and you probably hear all by now accomplished yogis, like which day are you in the immersion? Fourth. It's like we covered it pretty much, the ground. So all the energies are flowing now, not dissipating. This is the position to transcend. This is why. This is to create the possibility to stabilize the body. The real meaning of the asana is to create the possibility for anchoring and giving the support for consciousness to towards that grand control to major, right? And this is those of you who are old enough to remember the great British singer David Bowie. So that's the meaning of that, and I welcome you to simply reconnect to that, what all of you are here to learn through the timeless wisdom of yoga and Ayurveda, because yoga and Ayurveda are inseparable here from what the core question here represents. The core question is here presented by that predicament, by that even juxtaposition of these two terms. a bound creature versus master of one's own state of being. So this is what, more or less, is the leitmotif of the whole raison d'etre of the entire culture, the entire civilization. Civilization, not culture, because these are two different things. We should not confuse them. There are distinctions, and a big distinctions as well for that. So this served as setting forth something. And this is why people have always came to India throughout its very long history to reconnect to that. So just to get ourselves also quite, to get it clear in our heads immediately, that people did not just come to India, or Indian teachings did not just start to spill out of India in the past few decades, let's say, going back to the mid-century or the time of the counter culture movement of the 60s. It has been happening centuries, if not millennia. We can see that in the records of the Silk Route. The teachings were spilling out and cross-pollinated. Possibility was there, so that scholars, seekers can travel with the caravans under the safety and the protectorate of the empires they cross, so as to bring this formidable knowledge as far back as Venice and as far back as what will later be known as Chinese or Japanese civilization. So this is very, very clear, very clear. So India is not just something like phenomenal happened in more recent times, and whenever we truly connect to India, we connect to the core of who we are, not even having to go to the country. India here means the land of Vedas. My own teacher called and referred towards that culture in terms of the land of the Vedas. And you are here studying, connecting, reconnecting to these Vedas. Reconnecting, because you're not connecting to them. Connecting means there's no connection and one establishing the connection. There's no connection in this area and in that area, and we're going to establish the connection. We install antenna, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm trying to say. Reconnecting means it's already inherently part of who you are and how you are even wired beyond the most commonly understood synaptic processes. Why and how you are actually here functioning, that's what the Vedas are. Vedas are really the laws of nature which expresses themselves through this neurophysiology as universe incarnate. Simple as that. And that what makes it so formidable. That's what makes it so touch and go, that's what makes it so extraordinary. So, and I'm saying this, and of course I just making this attempt to bring this to some, to maybe connect various loose threads, various different threads of what you've been doing here and prior to that, obviously. Everyone comes from, all of you come from different walks of life. All of us come from different walks of life. And, for some it's a lifetime passion. For others it's just newly discovered interest. But this is just to position ourselves. And as I said, it's not premeditative. I didn't know what to bring. Really, my brains are also quite molten, and still in that very, very deep resonance of our immersion, how we call retreats. And so I'm making an attempt, I'm making a quite concerted effort to bring it to the level of even speaking about it. It would be much more actually true to the state I'm in, simply to be sunk in the heart and say, as little as possible. But since this gathering has been already put forth, there is the precedence. I am very happy to be here, to rise to the occasion, and I would like to justify this honored space to the way it's been prepared, so it's not taken for granted. So from this moment on, I would love to turn it to you, and if you would like to have any form of a dialogue, any form of inquiry, questions, I'll be very happy to engage in that way. Because, as I said, that's what it is. This, and that. It's very simple. It's very, very direct, very simple. What is communicated here is by far more precious than the words can ever be conveyed, than can be conveyed by words, through words. And those of you who are familiar with that, darshan, satsang movement, gathering. This is what it is. It's not a lecture. I don't have pedigrees or PDFs, not PDFs, PhDs, sorry. But whatever rises to the heart in response to what rises in the moment is all I can offer. So if any of you will be willing to open up an evening, that'll be lovely.
I would like to ask you, on your journey, on this journey we all are in searching for an answer to the question to who am I? Of course we encounter many, many things, and every time you think, hey, now I have a sort of answer, or I can take a next step. You encounter a lot of things which takes you far back, and then you really look at yourself and you think, I had all those answers, and it's like I forgot them at that moment. And I would like to ask you if you could give us an advice on this travel, how to stick with your own wisdom and have the trust that it's there.
There are many different ways of how this has been approached. We will use certain more or less by now universal language in English tongue for now, without resorting to more specific terms which for some would require elaboration. So therefore I personally prefer to bring more precise terms into the discourses, into the programs that we do. But I feel here maybe it's better if we simply stick with this kind of more what the common, let's say if someone is passing by now here and they just stopped and they were curious, what these people talking about? They will not be felt completely left out. They can still maybe relate to the conversation, right? So therefore I will use this term spiritual, but in the work that I do and the understanding I have, the term spiritual doesn't mean anything. And you know that very well already, even by sheer fact that you dipped into this work. You know, you've heard me speaking about it on various occasions, that in and from the perspective of utter and entire monistic understanding, there is only one reality. There are not two realities. It's only one reality. And this reality cannot be separated. This reality cannot be dislodged, even thread by thread, if we speak of the matrix of creation. We cannot have that as a possibility when it is viewed from this perennial understanding. Of course, if we are to resort to more dualistic perspectives, then it causes certain dilemmas, of course, even problems. But at the face value, it's easier. It's easier. The great religious traditions are thus, though present themselves as monistic, if you look at the core of what they are actually dualistic, you see, because there is God, there's a kingdom of heaven, there is this something greater than I am, greater than this life, there is this greater reality other than this. It's a kind of maybe another form of monism, we can come back to that. But from this perspective that you have touched, even in the very opening discourses of that very vast course that was recorded here, right? The majority, like the very large portion of that course was recorded in a yoga shower. So speaks straight from get-going that that's all there is, experience, nothing else. And that's all there is. This reality, it's all there is. So this is a very important understanding. This understanding that this reality is not composed of some kind of superimposition of some kind of inferior aspects, but the wheat would still have to be separated from the chaff, for sure. So this is where understanding is, I would say, what drives everything. It's a supreme understanding. And this understanding also will not suffice, of course, without having, experiencing, even from time to time, unless there will be an experience of the kind where all questions lay asunder. It's like, let me give you an analogy. It's psychological analogy. You thought that you have never known your father, you have never met your father, you don't know your father, and then suddenly you have met your father and you recognize your father not because someone said or he said or something. You look at your father and you simply see yourself completely. That recognition dawns there and then. No confirmation is needed. You vibrate with that understanding simply even at the level of somatic experience. Or a more abstract, let's say, example with someone who has never seen an ocean ever in their life. You know, they grow up somewhere inland, only rivers, water reservoirs, never seeing an ocean. Ocean where you do not see another shore, where it's water on all sides. And someone tells you about that. You hear about that. You try to imagine how that is. And suddenly you come to that shore and you behold that. You behold that whole vastness of the ocean. So this experience is visceral. But of course, translated into internal landscape of experiencing, there could be an experience which will simply outshine eclipse everything to such degree that any doubt, any iota of the doubt, any involvement in, let's say, peripheral understandings, any concessions, simply fall away. Simply fall away, they're not there, you see? You come out of that experience and you remain in the hum, like when someone strikes a large bell. There is degrees to that sound. The immediate impact is almost overwhelming, but then the sound ended and what left is that sheer resonance. Sheer resonance. You can't even call, you can't describe, is it a sound? Well, it's not sound because it's not even audible. I feel it. It vibrates through every cell of your body. It vibrates through every fiber of your being. And you will live in that hum for the rest of your life. You see? So when experiences of this kind take place, then no reminder is needed. This is the end of the story, the end of seeking. It's proverbial. You are that. And all this is that. And that is the only truth, as the Upanishad declare. In the meantime, when this is not the reality of your experience, if this is not what happened, then the supreme understanding needs to be brought into a focal point of your attention almost as a mental hygiene, almost as a form of tuning yourself. Like a musician doesn't just live in precious instrument because it's precious. Every strad needs to be tuned all the time. Every instrument, you know. See how tabla, you know, tuning the tabla. Every instrument needs to be tuned repeatedly after playing, even for a while. It happens in a concert. It's an analogy how the supreme understanding here is meant to be brought to the focal point of attention. This, what we're doing here, is traditionally understood to be the very form of that reminder. Gathering in the name of truth. This is the meaning of the satsanga. Satsang. It has a Wikipedia entrance. It's a movement. It's a global phenomena. It's been going on for now, what? Into a third decade. Started somewhere in the 90s. It has its ups and downs, it has its stars, and it has its, you know, it has peaks and valleys, of course, it has. But the point is, this format is one of those places where that reminder is brought back into the focal point of our attention. And what is the reminder? It's that reminder that whatever we do, whatever we are engaged with in our daily life as householders, will always be at the expense of that what illumines it all, falling on the background. I almost want to invite a conscious pause here, because the word simply too easy. No, I would like to repeat that, and I invite you and everyone to reflect on this. Every experience, any experience, whatever that might be, is at the expense of that what illumines it in the first place. Without that, the experience will not take place in the first place, is falling on the background. You never see the projectors on stage when you are in a fantastic lodge watching a show, do you? No, your eyes are on the show. All your ears are on the sound. You're following the narrative. There's something is going on that stage. There are roles enacted. Something going on. Something is being performed. That's your engagement. You're not sitting there and looking back. Oh, there's a red, or there's a green light, lighting the whole. No. This is like dislodging that experience. You lost to the experience. Why are you in the theater in the first place? Because to enjoy the show. You're not there coming to, I'm going to find out how they do that. you know. Franco Zeffirelli lit up Giorgio Armani show at the Royal Academy of Arts in the early 90s. It was an artful event. There were no models. Did you hear me? There were no models. Clothes were hanged, often in the vitrines, giving the scope of that man's over the years, his impact on the fashion. Not just impact, but a cultural impact. Because Giorgio Armani, maybe now written off, but back in the days, was considered to be a very important designer. Very important designer. Not many people know that. So when that show was staged, Franco Zeffirelli was invited to arrange that show. It's a deadly experiment to give clothes a place to hang. Clothes meant to be worn. They become alive when they're worn. You see? But that's happened on every runway. It happens on every fashion show. It's all the time. Instead, it was given the possibility of giving it a kind of museum quality show. I mean, people were criticizing it, you know, like this is snobbery, has no place in the place where the art, works of art are displayed, you know, because it's not Royal, what did I say? Royal Academy, yes, Royal Academy on the Piccadilly in London. But I went to that show, I walked around, yes, of course I loved Giorgio Armani, yes, of course I owned a few pants and jackets, and of course as a young artist I was splurging around and I wanted to look good. I wanted to look like a legend out of the shop, instantly like that. Wouldn't you, in your 20s? Come on, stop pretending like Brenda. We wisen up later in our lives, right? We did a lot of things to superficially cut the kind of like, you know, through the chase. But when I went to that show, I was amazed what the story, the clothes are telling us here. How that happened is because the way it was lit. The great master of lighting was in charge. He made clothes look like sculptures. Sculptures which has no weight. They were works of art. Conversation is finished, ended. This is why the audacity to have the show in a place where you see paintings, sculptures, and all the rest of the what have you. So this is a very important reminder, daily reminder. Soon as you smell the flowers, the flower becomes a focal point of your attention. You know, you put that strawberry, that ice cream, whatever, anything sensory or otherwise extrasensory, at the expense of that what illumines it, being on a background. You see? So this is a supreme understanding because this is the way it functions, the way it works. And you know from what you have hopefully by now had the chance to delve into, this was given the attention, why that relationship is, and this is where that Shiva-Shakti dyadic relationship and how it works itself, right? How that translates into subject-object relationship. Subject, which is the only experiencer, the only observer, one and the only. Always overshadowed by an objectivity of the experience. So this is a supreme understanding. If and only if you are capable of tapping into what it really represents, then unnecessary psychological tension of me forgetting about God, so to speak, me being carried away by life is gone. Instead, you consciously give yourself to the experience to such degree, propped with understanding, that that experience itself, although seem like robbing me of my essence, is not. It is there to illumine that experience. So this teaching is therefore is formidable. Formidable. Because this teaching returns sacredness to everyday life. It brings sacredness back into where it belongs. It's not the teaching of this is sacred now and this is profane now. So let's just separate that. And we continuously separate this, that, and our fragmentation already given at the expense of our neurophysiology, dual nature of the brain, all that, subject-object dynamics. We're constantly walking around rendered apart. You see? So this teaching comes in to bring back sense of unity. Therefore it's called highest yoga. So therefore, next time you feel like, oh, now you are lost, right? You are taken out of your, let's say, peace, out of your bliss, out of your seat. If it's accompanied by this understanding that this is a legitimate, that's how it works. This is not some discrepancy. This is that design. You see? The design is to sit in your chair and watch the show on stage we call life. Not to turn around all the time. Where the, you know, how, where is the camera? You're not directing the show now. It's directed. Enjoy it. Savor it fully. Lose yourself in the show. Lose yourself legitimately in that show. And realize that everything is that show. Everything is that stage. You come out, you'll regain yourself. That's why spiritual practices, that's why there's sitting, that's why there's recentering, that's why there's satsang. You see? That's why there is this. But we can't afford anymore to twiddle our thumb. What am I doing here? Because the propensity is very strong. We're programmed as well. You see? It's like that story. That's a simple story of renunciate, right? Versus party goer, you know? Renunciate is sitting there and it's like, gosh, I could be now really, really having great fun, you know? And the party goer is like raving there somewhere, you know, completely expending his life force on all the stuff and thinking, I could be now meditating, you know? And none in that what is happening. It's a reminder how things are. But when things get adjusted, you sit, you sit. You walk, you walk. Above all else, do not wobble. That's the Zen proverb. Simple.
I've been.
Excuse me. Maybe if it's easier for everyone, put a little bit the aircon, not aircon. What is that? The fan. Just a gentle, like maybe small mode. I mean, like a light mode. Sorry.
Coming to this retreat has coincided with a sense of impasse in my spiritual practice, which has been in the last couple of years just on my own, and basically following the principles of Advaita. And I'm not sure whether that sense of not being able to go any further is due to lack of single-mindedness or intent or determination, or whether it's indicating that maybe this isn't quite the way for me, and that an alternative which is not so austere or even life-denying in the normal sense might be more appropriate. And it's very difficult for me to see that clearly.
You're asking the wrong man. you're asking the really wrong man, you see? Because when I rave, I rave. When I sit, I transcend. And there are no questions in between, you see? Nothing is denied. No poles of opposites here. Nothing to reconcile. It's all already perfectly, forever, beautifully balances itself out. So, you want to be converted? We'll make you to a tantrika. No problem. This is part of our mission here. I think they inserted me here for one evening just to, no, it's just, not just put the seed. You'll never be the same anymore. It's like, you see, you sat like this, you're asking for trouble, Doing Advaita, right? She knows. So, but on a more serious note, dilemma is always somewhere more at a superficial level, really. The dilemma is not really at the level where the real thing is taking place. Because that's what is required in the path where everything is so-called follows the all-embracing, as seemingly opposed to that which sees everything as just a transparent appearance in awareness, therefore ephemeral, not taking place, almost on par with simulation, like the Silicon Valley apparently these days enamored with, right? You may have heard that it has its own proponents. Not only the freaking billionaires, they want to also enjoy the status of cult figure like prophets like. Elon Musk is not just enough to be he wants to also be known as we are all in some grand simulation. None of it is happening, okay? Our consciousness can be uploaded. These perspectives of course are there, have always been, and they run parallel. They don't negate each other, or they do, but at a more superficial level. The decision here is what is close to your heart. Someone's heart, born renunciate, very rare. I bow to these people, sincerely, because these people come from a different cut, you see? Maybe everything has been experienced already somewhere, somehow. So coming in, taking human form, has a very different meaning. Not because one here cannot deal with it and wants to somehow reduce the pressure, reduce the tension, reduce the intensity. Because that's what milk down Neo-Advaita really provides, if you're familiar with the jargons and the conversations, right? Unfortunately. Yes, you can see that. You can see how it's like this cherry picking, it's constantly happening. It's a part and parcel of the being, in this postmodern world where everything is available. One just, okay, well, all right, that part in Tantra really fits and works nicely with me. I'll take that, okay, but not the rest. Okay, I quite love the Sufi, I love all that heart-based stuff and poetry of it all. Okay, I'll take that. So it's just, But fundamental question here is not that. So there has to be constant adjustment in your compass that always points to the heart. So therefore, its true north is never fixed, like in Jack Sparrow, which I like to give that example. It's totally effed up, This is why the guy, when he asked me, what do you want? Like, I said, sir, can I have that? when his life is just like at stake and everything, he could have anything because the young lady he just saved is now granting him to have anything he wants. So as an officer, he wants to show off. It's in one of the earlier Pirates of the Caribbean, in case you've forgotten. He says, okay, what do you want? And he points, because everything was taken from him. So the officer takes that compass, opens it, and the compass just goes like wacky, it just, it's like, this guy is total nuts, have it. And life belongs to us who are not enough to follow that compass, which doesn't point anywhere except to that what is truer, to the heart, and that all that matters. But it's not easy, not always easy, to actually live by that compass, and often misunderstood in terms of what it represents. So therefore, at a light-hearted level, right, you might just ask for trouble by bringing this up, and but on the other, it's like if the question rises, and that already is something, isn't it? If that question rises to the surface, then you need to go and leave no stone unturned. You need to truly do this work on your own to redefine what is truly there serving the purpose and your evolution, and how does it sit with your understanding, because it's not adhering to someone else's understanding, because that's not the point. The whole point is that to reclaim that understanding as one's own reality.
I'm not a born renunciate.
Well, that's a start. So.
Oh.
Anyone else to piggyback, as they say?
Yeah, I want to.
I'm just warm, trying to get some cool air.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's hot.
I want to maybe on this heart thing. Well, we had a few very soft meditations here, but for me it was really nice where Seminary guided us to feel the expansion and to really go when the breath, when it's not the breath, when you feel this expansion coming, I can feel that. But the heart somehow doesn't expand alone. I had, after our immersion in Soundstone, where there was a man who spoke about his expansion, where he was in a tea shop actually drinking tea. I don't know if you remember, this guy told about his experience that I actually had a similar experience when I was younger.
Hang on a second. Let's just stay with this, because it's important not to go to memory and not to go into this kind of like, as we start. Let's just stay with this. Yeah. What's the core of the question? Is this meditation on expansion, of losing the boundaries, yes, to become boundless, right?
Yes.
And feeling that the heart cannot,
yes,
expand, right?
Yes.
So let's stay with that. Okay? There are different kinds of meditation, different kinds, and you know already some of them intimately. Mm-hmm. You know what is also known as bread and butter in this work. Mm-hmm. You know that we work with breath, right? Why? Because that's how God dwells in the body. It's as simple as that. So what you need to understand here is that there are different forms of meditations devised for different purposes of ultimately leading to the same goal, right? And tantric meditations in particular are all geared for reconciling anything that stands on its way of having this, what otherwise feels as being rendered asunder. You see? So the noble goal of meditation is to, I would now use the way how Maharishi Mahesh Yogi spoke about that. And also it's very, very scriptural. It's also deeply within the way the purpose of meditation is understood. Meditation is a natural state of mind. Mind is sattva, right? Manas chaitanya. Mind is consciousness. You're touching up on that already in this, I'm sure, in this retreat. I'm absolutely guarantee you, because Sundarima and Amritama Devi, they are steeped in this work, in this understanding. That all that what maybe seemingly comes through guiding meditations, preparing food, has that at its core. Is to reconcile the transcendental with what comes across as relative. We touched up on that when we spoke just a moment ago with Brenda with regard to these reminders. So Maharishi used to say that when one meditates in time, one's meditation, which may at first appear as being dull, uneventful, becomes more dynamic. In other words, silence becomes more dynamic. And one's dynamic aspect of life, when we come out of meditation, is infused in silence. And it is perpetual infusing. Remember how often I give that example? Do you remember?
Yeah.
It's like pouring oil in an uninterrupted stream from one container to another. So when we meditate, meditation properly understood, it's not even what a lot of people think, and unfortunately, it is a plague today. A plague. People think meditation is to sitting down and boom, transcending. No, no, no. It doesn't happen like that. So it's that what in the dynamic sphere of activity, all that is offered into the silent sphere of activity. And that what is in the sphere of silent is being brought to the surface of where the dynamism is at play. So with time, that polarity begins to lose its sharp edges, and it becomes more and more and more and more infused. When it infused enough, the difference between meditation, sitting in meditation, and being active is no longer pronounced. It's an extraordinary state, but also very ordinary. You act, interact, engaged, active. But that activity is somehow also not at the expense of what we spoke earlier. Now it's a very, very fitting adjustment, because that silence is being still savored, sensed, felt. How? Each and everyone will know that in their own way, in their own terms. Whereas meditation becomes enlivened, just as silence, which prior to that may have all the inert qualities, is now enlivened. So this sphere of life, these two shores of existence are being brought together, reconciled. The silent and the dynamic sphere of life are now no longer stand in opposition to each other, as they do in our experience, because that's the way also neurophysiology functions here. maybe our whole culture functions here, maybe the whole thing is how we are programmed currently. So the very, very goal of spiritual practices, how Tantra sees that, is to bring that into the reconciliation. Okay? So that's number one. So therefore it employs various different forms of meditation. Some meditations are precisely for that, to give us this feeling of expansiveness, to forgo this physicality of which comes with also unquestioned, unchecked, not fully examined, right? Adopting that the parameters of my consciousness is my body. Maybe someone who played and toyed a little bit with the New Age, the parameters of my body extend into the aura. Fine, so this is me. Not just this, but this. On a good day, it's this. On a bad day, it's this, you know. It thins itself out, it extends forward, but that's it. But this is a very limited perspective. Very limited, both understanding and also something which does not allow one to tap into a subtler, more refined, which is always there, where that, what one experiences in meditation, where these boundaries are consciously laid asunder, these boundaries are consciously dissolved, is actually a normal state of being. And we know that when we feel creative, when we feel love, when we feel all that what is known as synonymous in the vocabulary, what stands for God, awareness, oneness, unity, we are simply unraveled across the universe as a given. Being in a creative act, you don't know where your body begins, where your body ends. No, you forget, you forgo your body. You are in that state of flow. The body is still there, does what it does best. So, but when it comes to the meditations on the heart, meditations to dissolve the boundaries, to extend where some maybe will need a little more kind of to be tweaked here. It's the fifth quality of prana that is here taking over. It's the jnana, the all-pervasive prana. All that we experience is due to the vayus, movements, right? These pranic movements. So when jnana takes over, then we feel literally no longer localized. Because that's the quality of that prana. It's all pervasive. And the meditation is directed and geared towards consciously dissolving these boundaries, boundaries of the corporal reality we call the body, you see? Like body that touches the earth, but body that is here, digests food, moves about. But when you meditate on the heart, it's a different quality of transcendence, it's a different quality of experience. So you don't need to have that experience through meditation on the heart. It doesn't have to, you see? Because the heart is where prana actually gathers back, all the pranas gather back into. All pranas are here in a state of equilibrium, at a state of repose and a deep sleep as a given, and in a more or less, I would say, withdrawn enough state of samadhi, that state of absorption, right? Meditative absorption. So when we do the meditations on the heart, the breathing through the heart, or like we also in the 10-day one that just now, we did various other meditations that Yara can maybe share, not to guide you, but just to share. Welcome to share that. Because I've never introduced these meditations. This was complete and utter novelty, but we brought it out into the programs, seeing through the heart, in addition to breathing through the heart, and working with imagination, further working with imagination, just as we do when the meditation on breathing through the heart. So this meditation is not going everywhere in terms of that all-pervasiveness, breaking consciously the parameters of the body, dissolving them, moving the pranic force to all, like, because I don't know exactly how Sundari guided, but she's very, very skilled at that. She's been trained long enough and have enough experience to do that. But there are, for example, helpful pointers like, first you feel your body. First you feel the parameters of your body. Sometimes even feel the gravity. Sometimes you feel, first to connect to the body so as to bounce off the body and begin that expansion. In the heart, we are moving towards the void. So in other words, it's the opposite direction. You see? The heart doesn't need to go anywhere. It contains it all. In this all-pervasiveness, the moving agency here is Vyana, Vayu, Vyana. All-pervasive, unraveled, beyond the boundaries, boundless. In meditation on the heart, we bring all the pranic forces, all the pranic currents into the void of the heart, and they are lulled there, you see? And when that meditation reaches that quality that is set forth in the stages of when you're doing it, whether someone's guiding or whether you're doing it on your own, there is this point where that all-pervasiveness is not happened because of that what is being achieved through the sense of expansiveness. But you find yourself limitless in the void of your heart. You see? So this is the only understanding that you need now. So you don't need the heart to go out into the world and become big like that. Because the heart contains it all. We're not speaking here of the heart in any other terms other than the seat of consciousness, isn't it? Yeah. Clearly. We speak about here as the heart as one and only reality, Hrid, Hridaya, the heart. We speak about it from that formidable understanding that Shaivites infuse that term. It's the Alpha and Omega. It's the place of birth and return. It's where our individuality comes forth as that lotus flower that grows out of the deep, deep void of consciousness to blossom. And it's that very, very place where that whatever is here experienced is retracted or withdrawn. There's only the heart. And we consciously, repeatedly come back to that until that heart claims us completely, utterly, and entirely. And we begin to live our life from the place of the heart in all circumstances, in all conditions and conditionings. Because we are no longer anchored anywhere. We're anchored in the void of our heart. So that's the only understanding that is needed here. Okay?